If you've ever wanted to travel overseas solo after the age of 60, then stay tuned to today's video. I'm going to talk about a lot of the things you need to consider when planning such a trip. So as you can see from those couple of clips, when you especially go to Europe, which is what I can primarily speak about in this video today, you're going to encounter a lot of challenges, especially in regards to your mobility and ease of getting around, because unlike in the US, for instance, you're not going to see as many ramps or accommodations made for people with disabilities here. There just aren't. And so those accommodations for people with disabilities are really like it's something we just take for granted in the US, but you're not going to find them as much in Europe. And so there's a lot of stairs. And I don't mean giant flights of stairs all the time. I mean, but little stairs everywhere. Getting in and out of businesses, getting onto transport, getting, when you're actually at a train station. Not all train stations have elevators that take you from one floor to another. So all of these things are things you're going to want to consider. This topic really arose out of two things. First of all, my own experiences over here, which have been plentiful, and also a comment from a viewer who actually asked me for some advice about, whether or not she should undertake a trip to Paris. Now, I'm not going to give all the details of this woman's situation, but she basically had mobility issues. She had some, issues that would prevent her from walking around like the average person. She basically had to use a walker. She wanted to go to Paris. She wanted to know if that was feasible. I said to her that, first of all, I'm not an expert about any of this. I can only speak from my own experience. And what I have noticed so far being in France is that, yeah, there are a lot more challenges if people need to use a walker, if they need to use a wheelchair, a motorized scooter of any kind. There's a lot more challenges to that. There are places that just don't have ramps or elevators or escalators even, and where you think you might need them. And so I just told this woman that I said, you know what? I can't speak to your particular situation because I don't know, I don't know the extent of your mobility issues. I don't know what would be challenging for you in particular. I do know that there are fewer mechanisms in place to really help people who have disabilities, and that's just the way it is. Now, I can't say that that's true of all countries in Europe. I certainly can't speak to that. As I go to different countries, I will let you know if I see differences. But if I had severe mobility issues, I can tell you for my own sake, I would be probably reluctant to come here unless I came with a group, unless I came on some sort of a tour that actually offered, mobility assistance. Because if you're not able-bodied and you can't just get around, you can get around here, like if you just had a cane, for instance, you could probably do that. But if I had a walker or something, no. On a lot of these streets that you're walking along, as you could see from my quick video there, there's a lot of cobblestones, there's a lot of uneven pavement, there's a lot of, they don't have, when you cross a street, there's not necessarily an easy way to do that. You have to step off a curb, and the curbs are different heights. Just basic little things like that I've noticed. I've been much more aware of it on this trip. So So can I tell you that if you have mobility issues, you shouldn't come here? No, I would never say that. But I think you have to evaluate your own situation. So I wanted to say that off the bat because I think that's one of the reasons I wanted to make this video. There are real challenges to traveling alone after the age of 60, and one of them is going to relate to your physical fitness and mobility issues, of course. Well, I'm going to start with a couple of what I consider maybe less important issues, and then build up to what I think are the overarching larger issues about this. So one of the issues is definitely, if you guys have watched my channel for a while, you know that luggage has been the bane of my existence on this whole trip. Now, I was warned. I was warned by savvy viewers who knew better. Now, if I had been coming to France to live, I would have come with 2 really large suitcases that I checked, like checked baggage, and then a carry-on and a backpack or whatever. But I didn't come over here to live, but I still came with a larger suitcase, a smaller carry-on, another kind of like pseudo backpack initially. Now I have a real backpack, but it was too much. It was too much for travel. So if you're just coming over for, a briefer period of time or for longer stay travel, even like I'm doing, you need to not have more than one carry-on bag, preferably on wheels, like 4 wheels, and like a backpack or something like that that you can at least sling over your back or carry on your front or however you want to carry it. But that's the only way to go. It's just too difficult otherwise. So that is one thing that I definitely agree with a lot of viewers who warned me ahead of time, and until you make the mistake yourself, you don't realize it, but I do now. So I'd rather live with fewer clothes and have less to lug around because the trains are very unforgiving. Talk about something that is not really conducive to mobility issues, it's the trains. It really is the trains. So if you're taking the trains in Europe, there's all different types of trains. Some you have to go up several steps to get on the train. Some of them is just like you just can kind of step up a little bit to kind of it's a slightly different level than the actual like, train station, where you're stepping off from. But it's all different. You never know what you're going to get. And some of the trains have an upper level, some don't. So you'd really never know. And in some trains, you can request to sit on the lower level, but not all trains have that option. So there's a lot of issues with that, which relate to luggage, but also, again, goes back to the mobility issues. Okay, I thought I'd change my position a little bit in the room. You can see somebody back there, like, peeking, like, at what's going on. Anyway, another thing that I think is very important is, because especially if you're over 60, is if you're going to do any kind of extensive travel, even if it's of several weeks, you want to get as fit as you can before you come. And, I walked pretty much every day, so I did have walking experience, and that has helped a lot over here. But I'm walking far more over here than I was at home, and so I've had to kind of pay the price for that I get more tired, I'm not used to it, I have to kind of build up that. But I also think it's important to do things like strength training and things like that, which I did some of, but I think I needed to do more. So, and when I first got here, the first month that I was in Perpignan, France, I really didn't do my exercises, which was not good. So you have to be as fit as you possibly can. Do I wish I had lost weight before I left the U.S.? Yes. Yes. Having extra weight on you is not fun. It's been difficult so far to get that weight off because I haven't had a good kitchen set up that I can really make, some lower calorie meals and some healthier meals, which I really need to do. So I'm hoping when I get to Albania, I will definitely be able to do some cooking. Not extensively, but I will be able to do some cooking. So I'm going to try to eat healthier for that couple of months, and maybe I'll be able to lose a little weight. But yeah, get as fit as possible before you come and do something like this. It really, it really makes a difference. This is a whole other level of intensity as far as stamina goes and energy. And, you know, I'm going to talk in a few minutes how you have to kind of adapt to that. But just overall, I would say be as fit as you possibly can, especially if you're coming over here for a longer trip. Now, if you're only going somewhere like one place in Europe for a week, probably not as important, but it's definitely important if you're coming over here for a longer period of time. So keep that in mind. I want to talk for a minute about safety issues, which are also, especially if you're traveling alone, and especially if you're a woman and you're over 60. So, you know, as the old saying goes, you kind of have to keep your head on a swivel. And you have to notice, you have to be much more observant and notice things as much as possible when you're just walking around. Most of the places that you're going to go in Europe, the type of crime that's going to occur is what we call petty theft. You're going to encounter pickpockets, people that, you know, try to distract you and they're going to steal something from you. So the main thing you can do, especially as being a woman, always have a crossbody bag on you with zippers on it and have the zippers closed. Don't leave your bag open when you're walking around. Don't put stuff in your pockets. Make it as difficult as possible for people to be able to steal from you, basically. I have a crossbody. I actually have a smaller one and a larger one that I use when I'm walking around. They both have straps that you cannot easily cut. So nobody can just like slash. You don't want anything with little skinny straps on it where somebody could just slash that and grab it off your body. So you have to pay attention to just, you know, to being as safe as you possibly can. Beyond that, don't be walking around at every second and being totally afraid of that. It's not, I've actually not yet encountered a situation where I felt like there were a lot of pickpockets or thieves around, but I've also not been on the metro or the subways or the tube in London yet. So I'm sure like when I go to London, I am going to be riding the tube, and I'll be honest with you, I'm going to be extra vigilant and make sure that, you know, I've got my hand on my bag, on my crossbody bag, that the zippers are totally closed. I've got my hands on the zippers, and I'm not going to allow myself to get distracted. So you have to, you know, adapt to whatever situation you're in. Now, the safety isn't just about that kind of thing. It's also just about your personal safety. Now, everybody is different. I've heard from people that are older, that travel alone, that say they go out in the evening, they go out to dinner, they go out and walk around in the evening in a city, and they feel fine about it. That's great. If you feel comfortable doing that, I personally don't, but that's just me. I've personally for years not really been a person that liked to go out at night after dark by myself. So I just don't do it. I just kind of make it a practice. I was doing that when I was in the US, and I do it here. Now, if I'm with someone else, yeah, then I probably would. But being alone and being a woman in particular, I'm just reluctant to go out there and be alone at night. So for me, that's my safety kind of best practices. But you know, you have to make that decision for yourself. But I'd say especially for anyone who's traveling alone, who's a woman, you have to have kind of a little bit of extra layer of caution to this. And I have yet, I mean, I had a couple of, I've talked about it on my channel, I had a couple of weird things happen when I was in Perpignan, but not that made me feel afraid for my life or that I thought something bad was going to happen to me. It's just that they were uncomfortable. So just be, you know, and I've been over here now over 10 weeks. So, and I've been in Dijon now for over 2 weeks, and here I don't think I've had anything that really made me feel uncomfortable or afraid or, you know, whatever. So I think it just depends on where you are and, you know, what's going on. But just have your radar up at all times and be aware, and that's my best advice for that. Okay, we'll move back over here. So I'm in my closet. So the next thing I want to talk about is rest, taking care of yourself physically. So obviously, it's best if you eat well, which I apparently don't, and probably if you take vitamins, which I apparently don't. So I'm the person who's telling you what the right thing to do is, but I honestly don't really do it, and I should. But I honestly can't justify carrying around a bunch of vitamins in addition to everything else I'm carrying around as well. So that's a hard call for me right now. But plus, I've not been a big vitamin taker for the most part, most of my adult life. So, but I do recommend that you take care of yourself physically as much as possible. And that means that if you're getting tired, like I started getting really tired, especially by the time I got to Dijon, um, rest. You know, I'm sleeping okay most nights, but I find in the afternoon I get I get kind of tired for a couple hours. And so now I just let myself do that. I lay down, I meditate, or I doze off if I need to. And then I'm good to go till bedtime, basically. So I'm not a person that historically is a napper, but I do believe you have to listen to your body. And if your body's telling you got to rest sometimes, I've been walking 2, 3 times farther most days here than I did when I was living in the US. So right there, that's telling me that, that extra energy to do that. When you're younger and you exercise more, you walk more, it like builds more endurance and things like that. And to some degree, that's true as you get older, but it also can wear you out faster as you get older. So just listen to yourself. If you're a person who's over 60, over 70, and you don't need to rest, great, good for you. I wish I felt like that right now. But for now, I have to kind of listen to myself, and I would encourage you to do the same. So let's say you planned a 2-week trip to the UK, and you're just going to go to the UK, but you're going to travel around the UK for 2 weeks. The thing is, don't plan it so that you're going every single minute of the day. Plan some rest into that 2-week trip. Even if it's like one full day of just resting or a couple of half days of resting, don't book it so full that you don't build in some rest time, because I think it's really important. When I went to Paris when I was in my 40s, I went there for 9 days by myself. I was younger. I didn't really need to rest. I went out all day. I was out for 8 hours, 7, 8 hours during the day, all day, and then I'd come back to my hotel and I'd just relax and go to bed early. And and that's all I needed to do. But I was also in my 40s. So when you, when you get older, I find right now that I'm really only able to go out there for about 4 hours at a time, maybe 5, and walk around. I sit down at times too, but I mean, walk around, look at things, just be out, go to the park, whatever. But I can still only do that for about 4 or 5 hours. And then I got to come back and I've just got to relax. So find what works for you and do that for yourself. That's what I think is really important. Okay, here's the thing that I think is the toughest part of traveling alone after 60. You know how the old saying goes, the buck stops here, the buck stops with you, basically. So when you're out there and you're traveling alone and you don't have a travel buddy or a spouse or a partner or somebody to be with, you have to handle it all. And to me, I think this is the hardest part. I'm mentally capable of doing that. I'm even physically capable of doing that for the most part. But it's not that it doesn't make it easy sometimes. I don't have anybody that I can say, "Oh, could you take care of that?" Or, maybe your husband or wife is better at making reservations than you are, or maybe you're better at something else. You can kind of split the duties of what you need to do, right? Well, you can't do that when you're alone. You got to do it all. You're a one man or one woman band, and it's all on you. I think this is one of the things that's least talked about traveling, especially extended travel, is the fact that if you're alone, it's so much on you. And any problems that come up, you got to deal with them. There's no one you can share that burden with. There's no one that you can bounce ideas off of. You got to just do it yourself. And I got to tell you, I would say overall, this has to me been the most challenging thing about this. Because as much as I'm used to being alone and handling my life alone, when you're traveling, it's like life on steroids. It's a whole other level. And you got to make sure all your ducks are in a row. You got to make sure that you double and triple check your reservations and know what you're doing ahead of time. And if there's a problem, you got to figure out how to deal with it, which you're never going to know in advance because, and one thing is for certain, there's almost always going to be problems. I've actually had way more problems on this venture, this voyage, than I expected to have. And although I'm glad it, knock on wood, has not been more at this point, but there's always going to be problems. So you got to just deal with them. And people should talk about this more, about traveling. They really should. And I don't hear it talked about as much. So I just want to share with you that you have to be mentally really sharp. You have to be capable of handling problems. You know, my nightmarish train ride, things like that. Only picture something even worse than that. You have to be able to, you know, think on the fly. You have to be able to adapt. You have to be willing to calm yourself down because no one else is there to calm you down. So there's a lot involved, just the logistics of doing this. So I cannot overstate this. I cannot overstate this. It is a very important thing. So if you want to go and travel solo and you're over 60, make sure you have not just the physical capabilities of doing this, but the mental capabilities of doing this, and even the psychological capabilities of doing this. You know, one thing that really helps me is that I have a really good sense of humor. And so I might get upset about something for a bit, and then my sense of humor kicks in, and I can just kind of laugh at myself or laugh at the situation or whatever and just kind of deal with it. The other thing that helps me is that I've been through a lot in my life. I've overcome a lot of challenges in my life. So all I have to do is think back to, well, you know, you handled X, Y, and Z, so you can deal with this. And then just sometimes I have to remind myself. Sometimes little Lucy has to remind me because, you know, she's the one that's zen and is very wise. So, but the point is, so it takes a lot of resources to do this. It takes a lot of inner resources to do this. You know, there's a big difference between going on a 2-week trip or 4-week trip or, you know, a little longer and going on an extended trip as I'm doing. And so when you try to compare those, when you say, oh, I did a 2-week trip and it was so easy. I had a couple of problems, but it was no problem. Yeah, well, somebody who's on just a 2-week trip, they have a place to go back to, usually, and it's just 2 weeks. The key factor here is time. It's like comparing apples to oranges. When you're talking about extended travel, it requires a lot more than just a simple trip did. As I mentioned earlier, when I went to Paris in my 40s for 9 days alone, it was a piece of cake. Okay? This is not a piece of cake. But it's still enjoyable and it's still worth it. And I'm still getting a tremendous amount out of this. So again, goes back to the thinking in gray, shades of gray rather than black and white. You know, people will say, oh, well, you've had such problems, so you're not enjoying it. You should just go home. No, I don't really think that's the way to approach life overall. And first of all, just because every moment is not enjoyable doesn't mean you just pack it all in and say, oh, I'm done with this. That's not the way I'm built. Hopefully it's not the way a lot of people are built. So, no, I don't think that way. I've enjoyed a lot about this, but there's also, I admit, been a lot of problems. Let's talk about the bottom line on this. If you're going to, if you really like for me, this is the dream of a lifetime. I am living the dream of my lifetime, which is, I wish I could have done this 40 years ago, even 30 years ago, even 20 years ago, but I didn't get to do it then. And the reasons for that are multifaceted. Part of it's my own fault, part of it's life issues, part of it's things out of my control. There was a lot of reasons I couldn't do this earlier in my life, but I'm doing it now. And am I doing it the way I would have wanted to when I was younger? No. But I'm still doing it. And the point is, everybody's situation is different. Everybody's situation is different. So you have to decide what is important for you. What kind of trip or extended trip or maybe moving to another country, what is important for you to do? And then find a way to make that happen for yourself. You know, I believe in expanding the boundaries of your own comfort zone as much as you're able to. At a certain point, it becomes really uncomfortable to get past a certain level of your comfort zone. So I recommend doing it gradually. But the point is that, you know, find what works for you. Some people don't have any tolerance for getting past their comfort zone. And that's, everybody's different. There's nothing wrong or right about that. It just is. But if you're willing to, you know, test the limits of your comfort zone, of your own, you know, you're testing your own limits, basically, then figure out what you want to do and how to make that happen. If you're not capable of doing a long extended trip because of mobility issues or life issues or monetary issues or whatever it is, then find a way to do it on a small scale. And you will have far fewer problems if you do it on a small scale, believe me. You know, I metaphorically jumped off a cliff here. I metaphorically jumped off a cliff. But I was in a position to do that. Now, not ideally. Ideally, I would have had a lot more money and I would have been coming over here to live. That would have been a much better situation. But I still decided to make lemonade out of the lemons and do the best I could, which is what I'm doing every single day. So anyway, I'm not telling you what to do. I'm just telling you some things to consider as you make these decisions. And again, decide what's going to work for you, because everybody's different. Everybody wants something different. Nobody is the same psychologically or physically or mentally, or nobody has the same sense of adventure. So do what's right for you and at least make something happen in your life that you really want to do. You know, that bucket list item as we get older. And I believe in that. I believe in going out. I believe that as long as you're physically capable and mentally capable, that you should do everything you can to make your dreams happen. So, but that's my belief system. So anyway, hopefully this has been of some help to you today. Until next time, be kind always and keep moving forward. Take care. Bye.